To help us understand ourselves in this more fully global context, it's my pleasure to welcome Father José Mesa of the Society of Jesus, who is the Secretary for Pre-Secondary and Secondary Education of the Society of Jesus in Rome, to this podium. For the past 15 years, Father Mesa has been guiding the global network in its efforts, especially in discovering our global apostolic potential. Father Mesa will conclude his term as General Secretary later this year, and it's my pleasure to welcome him to the JSN Colloquium. Father Mesa.
Good evening. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. It's a great honor. I know that it has been a long day, but I hope that we together can understand a little bit more of the global context in this case. As Bob was saying, what I want to express to you is that we together are called to fulfill the dream of Ignatius of Loyola. His dream was really to have a universal body with a universal mission. To understand that, of course, we had to work in a local place, but we are together. And there are many colleagues like you in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, and in Europe. And we together had a common responsibility. And that is the big intuition of Ignatius of Loyola. And that is what he created that was completely different from other religious communities. So I think this is a great opportunity to really feel that even though you had to respond to your local context, we are really a universal body. See, this is our world. As Nadal used to say, the world is our house. And it's really indeed our house, because it's really, as you see, our schools are present in all corners of the world. I have visited many of these schools in the world. And it always amazes me how really our schools, although are very different and are locally run, this is the same spirit. We have so much in common. We really are working together even if we don't see the faces of our colleagues in other parts of the world. This is the statistics from this year that we have in Icalle. So you see we had around 2,000 schools, 932 of the traditional schools, as we call them, but we have many other ways in which we reach out to the youth in our world today. So this is really an amazing opportunity. It's a talent that we have, but are we responding to this talent? Are we able to think, to go beyond just our small place and understand that we have a common responsibility in the world, that we are all in this together? This is the call that the society has been doing from the beginning. The education of the youth is the renewal of the world, as Father Bonifacio used to say. And as you know, this is what is the only thing standing of the first Jesuit school in Sicily, in Messina, founded in 1548, and it says there, and it says primum ac prototypum, the first and prototype of all Jesuit schools. And it says there that the schools was for bonis artibus et moribus in Societatis Jesus Collegium. It was for the good arts and the good morals, so for what we call today the education of the whole person. But of course, ours is a living tradition. That means, as Arupe beautifully expressed, that what we want to do today is to educate persons for and with others. It's the same that we saw in Messina, but expressed in our words today. And as he said, our educational goal and objective is to form men and women who live not for themselves, but for God and for his Christ. Remember, when Arrupe was saying person for others, he was thinking in being persons like Christ. If you take Christ out of the picture, you take the soul of Jesuit education out of the picture. And it becomes just an NGO. I don't know about you. I'm not interested in working on an NGO. So this is really important because as Arrupe explains, Christ is the true person. So this is the core mission. This is the core mission that we always had. Yes, our tradition, our living tradition, invite us to really change continuously, to be able to understand that the world is different, that our local contexts are different, but our core mission remains. You see here that this is really a living tradition, not just in words. And you see here some of the things that we have been doing since 1967 when the General Congregation created the Secretariat for Secondary and Pre-Secondary Education of the Society. And I emphasize what we have doing in the last years. But I want you to see that what we are doing, you are doing here today is part of this whole picture, and that we are taking seriously our responsibility to be a universal body with a universal mission. So many of you have been in some of these meetings. You have been maybe in Boston, some of you I know, in CPA later, in Rio de Janeiro, in the global colloquium that we had during the pandemic, the one that Bob just mentioned in Yogyakarta, and there is one coming up in your region, in Montreal, in 2027. And these meetings, these cycles, as we call them, are very important because, again, if Ignatius of Loyola will ally today, he will say to you, open your eyes and see how the world is changing. He was able to open his eyes and understood that his world was different from the world than when he was a child. And when he created the Society of Jesus, he was aware that he needed to respond to a different context. And that's the tradition with capital T that we have. But this is a tradition that invites us to recognize that God is acting in our world today. So the cycle of meetings, Bob was explaining, is with the idea to help us at the world stage to understand our context, our challenges, and our opportunities, and to work together to respond to the immense challenges that we have as a humanity. So today, we are now in the second cycle, working as a global network at the service of the mission, because that is what is really central to us, our mission today. And you will see here, you will see pictures, so you will see yourselves there. This is from 2012, when we had the colloquium in Boston. This is the CPA Manresa in 2014. That was also very important about Ignatian pedagogy and spirituality. You see this from Rio de Janeiro, when we created the first global agenda for our schools to make sure that we walk the talk, because we need to walk the talk in our world. We need to be serious about that. And we believe that Jesuit education has a big responsibility. Of course, the world is bigger than us, But we still in that, we have a big responsibility to be able to express to the world our possibilities and opportunities. And in 2021, because of the pandemic, we had this online colloquium. And as you remember, we had 4 topics that are very central to us. Educating for faith. So this is also to explain why we decided in Yogyakarta to talk about the faith formation. So this was already a topic that we had in the colloquium, but we also wonder about what it is the meaning of educating for death in our world today, educating for reconciliation, even more important in 2025 than in 2021, and educating for global citizenship that is so central, even though half of the humanity today don't want to recognize that we are the same humanity. And we have in 2024 this second seminar. Remember, the seminar is something that we have identified in ICAGE as really very relevant for Jesuit education today. And one of the things that we said, we really need to understand, to deepen in, and to discern what it means to be Catholic schools and what is the meaning of faith formation in our schools today. In the diversity of our context, in Japan, 90% of our students are not even Christians. 95% of our faculty is not even Christian. So what is the meaning to say that that is a Jesuit school in that context? In Marseille, we have a school that I visited not long ago. 95% of our students are Muslims. And this is in Marseille. So this is the world. So we needed to do this because, again, this is the center of who we are. But what is the meaning today? Ignatius of Loyola and the first companions had to respond that at that point in their life. And remember, from the beginning, they also welcomed others and were able to accommodate others. They accommodated many Protestant students in a time in which they were killing each other because they were Catholics or Protestants. So this is very important for us, and this is a topic that we consider very relevant for us today. So, and in this colloquium, in this seminar, we had 4 strands. I'm not going to enter into details, but just to explain to you what we did here. One was about Ignatian spirituality, about faith formation. What is the place of Ignatian spirituality? It's part, but it's not the whole thing. Also offering in-depth faith formation in our schools in interreligious dialogue. Because today, being a Catholic school means also to educate our students to the interreligious reality of their world. And educating also within the secular and religious fundamentalistic context of today. And all of these contexts coexist in any place, and it's going to be more and more that way. You will have in the same city people who are completely atheists and secular, others who are very Christians or Muslims or Hindus or believers or no believers or people searching. And Catholic and Jesuit identity in our schools today. So what is the meaning of that? What is the meaning of evangelization in our schools today? Because we thought this is a topic that we need to address. It's sometimes so difficult to address that we thought, well, if one of the dangers is that it's so difficult and is so important that sometimes we prefer not to talk about, or just to suppose that this is, or just to have the facade of Jesuit education, but behind the facade there is not much left. So that is why we thought it was very important. And as you know, this is in the vision statement, what you have there that I think captures very well the spirit. I must say that I was surprised when we had this vision statement because the people there felt very strongly about this vision statement. And if you read it, and you know it already, it's a very strong vision statement about our identity and who we are as Catholic schools, Jesuit schools in the world today. But again, life continues. So now we are already beginning to prepare the second Congress of Jesuit Montreal. And the Congress is the moment in which all the delegates of educations of the world, the PACE members of all the schools in the world, the JSN people of all the schools in the world, come together and say, okay, we have been talking about this topic in Yogyakarta. We talk about these themes in our online colloquium. So what are we going to do as a global network? So we will set up the agenda for the next cycle of Jesuit education. And I think this is a very important because, again, this keeps Jesuit education relevant. We cannot live off our past glories. And I have seen it. When a school begins to live of their past glories, is the beginning of the end of that school. And of course, we do this in the context of our global, universal, apostolic preferences. So we need to take this seriously. And this is also the context in which we were deciding that we needed to address how can we show the way to God through the spiritual exercises and discernment today. And also, you remember in 2019, we had Calle published this document, Jesuit Schools, a Living Tradition in the 21st Century. Remember that we don't have documents often. How many official documents has had the Society of Jesus on Education in 500 years? How many? You know how many? 1? 4. 4 official documents. This is the last one. So we don't do this often. So that means that we need to take seriously because there is a lot of discernment behind, especially on a global document. This document that Father General Arturo Sosa announced in 2019 really took us a long time to discern. And it went to many different phases to make sure that it was reflecting what God wanted from us today. And the particular question that we had for this document is how we can help schools communities to understand and respond to our present context and continue the long conversation that the first Jesuits began on education in the 16th century. I like that metaphor. This is a long conversation. And today, you are continuing that long conversation that we already have at the global level, at your local level, and see how that can be articulated. Because that is the beauty of Jesuit education. It's global and local simultaneously. It's local. Ignatius of Loyola created a one body, but it decentralized that body to run the schools locally. But we have a common responsibility for the global network. So what you are doing with this colloquium is to make sure that there is a connection and that we are really acting as a universal body with a universal mission. And this is what Father General said in that document. The best tribute that we can offer to our long tradition in education is to explore new models, creative and imaginative ways to offer our spiritual vision and educational experience to our students and their families. Thus, the title of the document reflects well his purpose, to renew our living tradition in education as an ongoing exercise of discernment. And this is what you are doing now as a JSN. This is what we did in Yogyakarta as a global network. Some of you contributed to that very meaningfully. And now you continue this as part of this global network. And I think it's very exciting to know that we are simultaneously able to understand our responsibility for the world, and that that responsibility also has local consequences for us. And remember that in that document we had how many global identifiers? How many global identifiers are in this document? 10, very good. Well, the first global identifiers is reflected to the seminar. Jesuit schools are committed to being Catholic and to offering depth faith formation in dialogue with other religions and worldviews. Let me tell you, of all the 10 global identifiers that we have, that I know that you know very well, this one was the one that we had the most discussions in education in ICALLE when we were discussing this. You can say, that's surprising because this is a Jesuit Catholic school. Well, it's true, but it's and I think this captures very well the tensions inside, but also the opportunities. It's Catholic, it's Jesuit, that's our identity, and it has to be a strong identity, because otherwise it will be a school without a soul. But at the same time, you see it's in dialogue with other religions and worldviews. And we are not afraid of recognizing that there are other religions, there are other worldviews, and we engage them. And we created this infographic that I hope that you know very well and that you have in your schools. I have seen it in some of our schools. I remember in Africa, in one of the schools that I visited, they have one the size that you see there. The same size, they have it in the school. And I think it's very good because this infographic was created with the idea, remember that you can download this from Educate Magis. By the way, this reflects very well the complexity of what we want to do in Jesuit education today. And this is very important because sometimes people define Jesuit education for one aspect that they like, but not for the whole package. And it has to be the whole package. I sometimes say that you say, why this is a Jesuit school? No, because this is the greenest school in North America. Beautiful, that is the greenest school in North America. But if it's the only thing that you are, that's not really a Jesuit school, sorry. No, because here global citizenship is everything. Wonderful, but if it's the only thing that you do is global citizenship, it's not a Jesuit school. Of course, it cannot be a Jesuit school if it's not green and it doesn't do global citizenship. But in the whole package, and in that whole package, you will see here this blue circle that is reflected in the first universal apostolic preference, and it reflected in the first global identifier. So it's the core of the core. So that is why Catholic identity and faith formation is so central to us. It's the core of the core. Again, without that, it's just a beautiful facade. Sometimes it's not even that beautiful. So this is really very important for us. But of course, we cannot tell you from Rome how that will look in your schools. Ignatius always said to the Jesuits, you need to make the decisions. Ignatius of Loyola in Rome could not tell the Jesuits who were in the jungle in Brazil what to do. But they were thinking with the same minds because they all had the same spiritual vision and experience. And that is what we need to maintain in our schools. And as Bob was saying, in 2021, we launched the Jesuit Global Network of Schools. So you are part of the Jesuit Global Network of Schools, and I am sure that you have this logo everywhere in your schools. Everywhere, especially in your hearts. Especially in your hearts. Because remember, when you work and you make decisions not only thinking about your school or JSN, but also in the Jesuit Global Network of Schools. That is our big responsibility. God has been trying since the beginning of humanity to tell us that we are all in this together. When are we going to get it? And here you see this, I have seen in some of the schools here in North America that it was created by the Educate Magis. And by the way, I am very glad that David, one of your own, is now the community director of Educate Magis and is helping us to really develop this great opportunity to work as universal body, as a universal mission. So you see here the potential that we have. And I hope that you and your faculty and your students are raised in this awareness that God is working to create a network, that we understand that we are one humanity, no matter the skin color, no matter the nationality, no matter the religion, no matter your beliefs. Because that is what really God is trying to do. But as you say, it's beautiful with burning hearts, search, encounter, and believe. So what this discernment that we have been doing at the global network and that we will continue in Montreal in 2027 has to continue at the local level. So you are now doing that to see how that is really possible in your schools, in your context, in your experience. Because as Ignatius of Loyola says, continuously everything has to be according to times, places, and persons. So you now have the opportunity to incorporate Jesuit, Georgia, what we did last year, and make sure that it's relevant for your local and your regional context. So I hope that you take it as a great opportunity to deepen our mission, to deepen our roots, to understand that really God has been calling us to work this together, that we can give a humanity a different perspective from the divisiveness that we have today. This also means that you always keep in mind that this is in the context of a global community centered in our core mission, as we have said. So go forth and set the world on fire, of St. Ignatius of Loyola used to say. Some people say that he didn't say it, but I was talking to a historian of the Society of Jesus in Rome, and he said, I don't understand how somebody can say Ignatius didn't say something like that. We don't have records of everything that he said. And he said, and he did show me places in which there are people who make references to this. Okay. What is really true and important is that together we are more magis to serve better in our local context. So let me finish with this. Thank you. Thank you because you are the ones who make Jesuit education possible here in North America. You are, for many students and families, the only face of Jesuit education that they see and they know. They don't know about the documents, they don't know about the global identifiers, they don't know about the UAPs, but they do know you. And they do know how you treat them, and they do know what message did you give. So you are the living tradition of Jesuit education. Thank you for what you do. God bless you, and let's continue walking and working together. Thank you.
So this might be Jose's last official talk to JSN, so I almost think we could do a big thank you. It really is an honor to have him here, and he will be here all week, so take advantage of that to have conversations. I would be remiss if I didn't say, if you have any questions or want to find out more about anything he spoke about, you can contact some of us too, and we'll be glad to offer some programming and things that are in place. So thank you so much. And remember the term glocal, the local action with global impact. And along those lines of glocal, we are going to turn now to one of our students. So our students are the reason that we show up to work every day. And we are pleased to introduce James Silva, who is representing the voice of our students. James is a student at Creighton University and a 2018 graduate of Jesuit Academy, Omaha, and a 2022 graduate of Creighton Prep. So thank you, James, for joining us.
Thank you for the introduction. And good evening, everyone. So as introduced, I will be giving a speech of just kind of a reflection of just my experience with Jesuit education and throughout my spirituality. And so I have a speech prepared here today, and so I'll take it away. So my name is James Silva, and I'm a proud alumnus of Jesuit Academy and Creighton Prep, and currently a student at Creighton University, double majoring in finance and marketing. And these are three Jesuit institutions that have not only shaped my education, but my heart, my values, and most importantly, my relationship with God. I'm from the south side of Omaha, raised in a proud Spanish Catholic family. I'm the fifth of 6 boys, raised by 2 loving parents who taught us that Sundays were for family, faith, and Mass. Some of my earliest memories, crazy as it sounds, aren't even about video games or cartoons. They're about sitting in the pews as a 4-year-old looking up at the altar and listening to the priest's voice echo throughout our church. But then everything changed. That same church soon closed due to financial challenges, and then my older brother started pushing against wanting to go to Mass. And slowly, Sunday traditions faded. I didn't understand it then, but something in me missed that sacred tradition. We tried attending other churches, but nothing felt like the previous one. Eventually, we stopped attending Sunday Mass altogether. And during those years, God didn't disappear, but the silence grew louder. And as I got older and started elementary school at our nearby public school, just 5 blocks from home, there was a small Christian after-school club that I joined with my brothers. And I was maybe 5 or 6 at the time, and they gave us snacks and told us stories from the Bible. And I remember one day being told that we weren't going anymore. And just like Mass, it ended without warning. I was little, and I couldn't choose for myself, but I remember how I felt. I felt spiritually pulled towards something greater. And even then, I felt God whispering, "I'm still here." Years later, an opportunity opened that would change everything. My mom had heard about Jesuit Academy from an older relative, and they said it was a school that would not just help with academics, but with faith, discipline, and growth. I was then enrolled for the 4th grade. And that summer, before the school year even started, we had a required camp. One day on the bus ride back to campus, I remember looking out the window at the bright blue sky, and I asked a question that had been quietly sitting inside me for years. God, are you real? And if you are, can you show me? And I didn't say it in fear or angrily in demand. I said it with that kind of honest curiosity that only an 8-year-old can really have. A few seconds later, a beautiful orange butterfly danced by my window, and I felt something, a warmth in my chest, a calmness in my heart, a quiet yes. And I knew God had heard me. And from that moment on, my faith wasn't inherited, it became personal. And at Jesuit Academy, I became a sponge. I soaked up the everyday prayers, the religion classes, the Wednesday masses, and I started recognizing the Holy Spirit in the songs we sang, and the silence after communion, and the way our teachers and staff prayed with us and not at us. But still, I carried a quiet tension. Even as I sat in those masses and grew closer to God, I never received the Eucharist. I would walk up with my classmates, cross my arms over my chest, and get a blessing instead. I wasn't confirmed, and I hadn't had First Communion. I knew I wanted it, but I just didn't know how to ask. And I remember being in 6th grade and finally building up the courage to go home and ask my mom, when can I receive my sacraments? I wanted to go deeper, and she smiled and told me how proud she was and said that normally we'd do that at our church, but since we haven't been a part of one for some time, she suggested I ask someone at Jesuit Academy if they could help. But I never asked. I was too nervous to ask. I didn't want to seem different, and I didn't want to draw attention. And so I waited. Still, that desire, that fire to truly know God, to receive Him, to grow in faith, it stayed burning in me. And I eventually graduated from Jesuit Academy, class of 2018, and was given the opportunity to continue my education at Creighton Prep. And I didn't know it at the time, but those next 4 years would shape not just who I was academically, but who I was becoming spiritually. Prep was a different world. I went from a class of 12 students at Jesuit to a class over 200 students. The building felt massive, the halls were unfamiliar, but I carried something with me. That same sense of purpose Jesuit Academy had planted in me. And I knew I wasn't alone. 5 of my closest friends from Jesuit were coming with me, and that gave me comfort, even if everything else felt overwhelming. Freshman year was hard. Besides hours of theology reading and preparing for tests, I struggled quietly. After my first semester, I failed English, and I was disappointed, ashamed even. I felt like I had let down everyone who believed in me, my family, my teachers, my brothers who were watching. It was a heavy burden. And when I finally told my parents, their response wasn't in anger. They looked at me in the eyes and said, as long as you're giving your full effort, that's what matters. Their grace gave me space to breathe, and over winter break, I had my first real moment of spiritual reflection. I knew I couldn't do it alone, so I turned to God, and not in a dramatic moment, but in a small, sincere prayer, asking for strength, for clarity, and for peace. Second semester came, and I stepped into it differently, more focused, more open, and that's when I experienced freshman retreat, a long-standing prep tradition that until then I had only heard about. I was grouped with a few other freshmen I didn't know, led by a senior who guided us through moments of vulnerability, laughter, and prayer. We also volunteered at a local elementary school, and I remember playing Kahoot with the third graders and helped one student through the questions. It was small, but I felt something ignite in me. And later that night, we sat together as a group and reflected on the retreat's theme, keep hope alive. And that phrase has stayed with me ever since. It reminded me that hope isn't the absence of struggle, it's choosing to stay open to light, even when things feel uncertain. My grades improved, my confidence grew. I also passed English with an A. And ultimately, I left that retreat knowing that I belong here and that I have something to offer. But just as I was finding my rhythm, the world changed. COVID hit during my sophomore year, school moved online, retreats were canceled, the silence returned, and like many others, I found myself alone with my thoughts, trying to hold on to my routine, faith, and community. What was supposed to be my junior retreat, junior encounter, never happened for me because of the pandemic. But by senior year, when things returned in person, I made the decision to serve as a junior encounter retreat leader. Even though I never experienced encounter as a junior, I stepped into the space with reverence, as if I were a participant myself. And I remember one exercise in particular, where we were asked to go out into nature and have a personal conversation with God. I walked to the edge of the camp, and I found a small stream and sat beside it. The breeze was soft, the birds were chirping, and I even held a few small rocks in my hand and just listened. And in that moment, I felt something beyond words, a quiet presence, a sense that I was being watched over, and that I was not alone, and that I was loved. And that's the thing about Jesuit education. It never forces God into the room. It invites you to notice that he's already there. And later that semester, something unexpected happened, something that would change the trajectory of my faith. And as I was walking through the first floor near the dean's office on my way to my car, when I heard a familiar voice, my friend Ismir. He was in a classroom talking with Mr. Cast, a Jesuit teaching at Prep, and I stopped by just to say hi, but within a few minutes, we were all talking about Sunday Mass. When Mr. Cast had asked me where I went to church, I had told him the truth. I don't really go to church on Sunday. He didn't judge me. He just smiled and said, "Would you be interested in attending service with me and other students at St. Benedict the More?" Being excited about the opportunity, I went. And then I went again and again. And soon I was bringing my younger brother, then my parents, and it became a Sunday tradition. Eventually, I joined the RCIA program at St. Benedict with my younger brother, Alex, and we began preparing together to receive our first communion and confirmation. Fast forward months later to Easter Vigil, surrounded by my high school teachers and family in the congregation, I finally received the Eucharist for the first time. It felt like that moment I had been walking toward ever since that day on the bus when I had asked God, "Are you real?" Now I just didn't believe I belonged. And a few weeks later, I walked across the graduation stage with high honors, obtaining the previous 2 years with a 4.0 GPA, but most importantly, carrying a heart renewed by faith, filled with gratitude and ready for what came next. And I want to leave you with this. Hope doesn't always arrive in bright lights or loud answers. Sometimes it whispers through people. Sometimes it speaks through patience. But it's always there waiting for you to say yes again. So wherever you are in your journey, keep listening, keep walking, and keep hope alive. Thank you.